In the heart of New York City, where skyscrapers towered over crowded streets and dreams often got lost in the chaos, there lived a young man named Ethan. He wasn't famous or rich. He didn't have a fancy degree or connections to big companies. Instead, Ethan spent most of his days riding through traffic on his old bicycle, delivering packages for people who barely noticed him. His uniform, a faded blue jacket with patches, was worn out, but it still carried the logo of the delivery service he worked for. Ethan's life wasn't easy. Born into a family that struggled just to put food on the table, he had dropped out of school at 16 to take care of his sick mother and younger sister. Every penny he earned went toward paying bills, buying medicine, and making sure his little sister could stay in school. Despite all this, Ethan had something special about him, a kind heart. No matter how tired he felt or how tough things got, he always greeted customers with a smile. Sometimes they wouldn't even look up from their phones as they signed for their packages, but Ethan didn't mind. "At least I'm doing something good," he would tell himself. One chilly December evening, as snowflakes began falling softly onto the busy streets, Ethan received an urgent delivery request. The order came from an upscale neighborhood, an area full of gleaming apartments and expensive cars that he rarely visited. Most of his deliveries were to small shops or middle-class homes, so when he saw the address pop up on his app, he raised an eyebrow. "Must be some rich person ordering late-night snacks," he muttered under his breath, shaking his head. The package was already packed and ready to go, a warm meal ordered by someone too lazy or busy to cook. Wrapping his scarf tightly around his neck to shield against the biting cold, Ethan hopped onto his bike and started pedaling. The icy wind stung his cheeks, but he didn't complain. This was part of the job, after all. As he rode, he thought about how different his life might have been if circumstances had been kinder. But instead of dwelling on those thoughts, he focused on the road ahead, navigating the slippery streets carefully. When Ethan finally arrived at the destination, a towering luxury apartment building, he parked his bike near the entrance and grabbed the package. The lobby inside was sleek and modern, with marble floors and golden elevators that looked like they belonged in a movie. Ethan felt slightly out of place standing there in his scruffy clothes, but he reminded himself why. He was here to deliver the package and move on to the next one. He pressed the buzzer for the penthouse suite, as instructed by the delivery app. After waiting a few moments, he tried again. Still no answer. Frowning, Ethan checked the instructions once more, wondering if he'd made a mistake. Just as he turned to leave, thinking maybe the customer had changed their mind, he noticed movement. Through the glass panels of the lobby door's it was an elderly man, shuffling slowly down the hallway inside. His hair was messy, and he wore pajamas that seemed 2 sizes too big. What caught Ethan's attention, though, was the way the man held his chest, grimacing as if in pain. Something wasn't right. Ethan hesitated for only a second before rushing to the door. "Sir, are you okay?" he called out, pressing his face close to the glass. The man didn't respond. Instead, his legs gave out and he collapsed onto the floor. Panic surged through Ethan's veins, but he forced himself to stay calm. He quickly scanned the area for help and spotted a security guard stationed nearby. "Hey, there's someone hurt in here," Ethan shouted, pointing frantically. The guard sprang into action, unlocking the door and rushing to the man's side. Together, they managed to turn him over gently, revealing a pale face contorted with discomfort. Ethan immediately dialed emergency services, explaining the situation clearly while keeping a close eye on the man. While they waited for the ambulance to arrive, Ethan stayed by the stranger's side, talking to him softly even though he wasn't sure if the man could hear him. "You're going to be all right," he said, trying to sound reassuring. To keep the man warm, Ethan removed his own scarf and draped it loosely around the frail shoulders. It wasn't much, but it was all he could do. Finally, the paramedics arrived, their flashing lights casting eerie shadows on the snowy street outside. Ethan helped them load the unconscious man onto a stretcher, answering their questions as best he could. When they asked if he knew the man, Ethan shook his head. "No idea. I was just delivering a package." As the ambulance drove away, Ethan stood there for a moment, feeling a mix of relief and unease. He glanced down at the package still in his hands and realized it wasn't even meant for the man he'd just helped. Someone else in the building must have placed the order. Shaking his head, he muttered, "Well, that was weird." With a deep breath, Ethan climbed back onto his bike and resumed his route, pushing aside thoughts of what had just happened. Little did he know, that brief encounter would set off a chain of events that would change his life forever. For now, though, he simply pedaled onward, disappearing into the snowy night, unaware of the storm brewing behind him or the blessings waiting just around the corner. The next few days passed in a blur for Ethan. He went back to his usual routine, delivering packages across the city and braving the icy winds that seemed to grow colder with each passing night. The strange incident at the luxury apartment building lingered in the back of his mind, but he tried not to dwell on it. After all, helping someone in need wasn't anything extraordinary, it was just the right thing to do. Still, there was something about that old man in pajamas that stuck with him. Maybe it was the look of pain on his face or the way he had collapsed so suddenly. Whatever it was, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the moment meant more than he realized. One afternoon, as Ethan cycled through a busy intersection, he noticed a sleek black car pull up beside him. The driver's window rolled down, revealing a sharply dressed man sitting in the passenger seat. His suit was tailored perfectly, and his leather shoes gleamed under the winter sun. Ethan slowed down, unsure what to make of this unexpected attention. People in fancy cars didn't usually stop for delivery guys like him. "Excuse me," the man said, leaning out slightly. "Are you the one who helped an elderly man last week? Near the luxury apartments?" Ethan frowned, gripping his bike handlebars tightly. Yeah, I guess so. Why?" The man smiled faintly, though there was a seriousness in his eyes. "My name is Daniel," he introduced himself. "I'm the son of the man you saved. Can we talk somewhere quiet?" Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Saved? Was the old man okay? 1,000 questions raced through his mind, but he nodded hesitantly. "Sure, I can spare a few minutes." They found a small cafe nearby, tucked away from the chaos of the city streets. Inside, the air smelled of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods. Daniel ordered 2 cups of coffee, insisting Ethan join him despite his protests. As they sat down, Daniel began explaining everything. "The man you helped, his name is Arthur Hartman." "He's my father," Daniel started, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "He lives alone in that penthouse. We haven't been close for years, but when I got the call saying he'd been rushed to the hospital, I dropped everything to be there." Ethan listened intently, his hands wrapped around the warm coffee mug. "Is he all right?" he asked cautiously. Daniel nodded. "Thanks to you, yes. The doctor said he suffered a mild heart attack. If you hadn't acted quickly that night, things could have turned out much worse." Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Hearing those words made him feel uneasy. He hadn't thought of himself as a hero, just someone doing what anyone else would have done. "I didn't really do much," he mumbled. "Just called for help and stayed with him until the ambulance came." "You did enough," Daniel replied firmly. "More than most people would have. And trust me, my family owes you a debt we can never fully repay." Ethan shook his head, trying to brush off the praise. "Honestly, it's fine. I don't expect anything in return. I'm just glad your dad's okay." Daniel studied him for a moment, his expression thoughtful. There was something genuine about Ethan, something rare in a world where people often looked out for themselves first. Finally, Daniel spoke again. I want to thank you properly. Money-wise, I mean. Please, let me compensate you for what you did. No, Ethan insisted immediately. I don't need money. Like I said, I was just doing my job. Well, not even my job, really. It was the right thing to do. Daniel sighed, clearly frustrated but also impressed by Ethan's humility. All right, if you won't take money, then how about this? Come work for me. My company has openings, and I think someone with your work ethic and character would fit in perfectly. Ethan blinked, caught off guard. Work for you? But I'm just a delivery guy. I don't know anything about running a business. That doesn't matter, Daniel said with a smile. You've got qualities that can't be taught: kindness, integrity, resilience. Those are the traits that make great leaders. Start as an assistant, learn the ropes, and see where it takes you. What do you say? For a moment, Ethan was speechless. This offer felt surreal, like something out of a dream. Here was a wealthy businessman offering him a chance to escape the grind of endless deliveries and late-night shifts. But could he really step into such a different world? Would he even belong there? After a long pause, Ethan nodded slowly. Okay, I'll give it a shot. But only because you're giving me a chance. I won't let you down. Daniel grinned, looking satisfied. Good, you won't regret it. Over the next few weeks, Ethan's life began to change in ways he never imagined. On his first day at Daniel's company, he walked into a sleek office filled with polished desks, high-tech gadgets, and employees dressed in professional attire. Everyone glanced at him curiously as he entered, their expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. Ethan felt out of place in his worn jacket and scuffed shoes, but he reminded himself why he was here: to prove that kindness and hard work mattered, more than appearances. His initial tasks were simple: organizing files, answering emails, and assisting senior staff members. At first, he struggled to keep up with the fast-paced environment and unfamiliar jargon. But Ethan was determined. He stayed late every evening, studying manuals and asking questions whenever he didn't understand something. Slowly but surely, he began to adapt. What surprised Ethan most, however, was the warmth he received from some of his coworkers. One woman in particular, a middle-aged manager named Lisa, took him under her wing. She noticed how hard he worked and offered guidance whenever he needed it. You remind me of myself when I started, she told him one day. Don't let anyone discourage you. You've got potential. Meanwhile, Ethan kept thinking about Arthur, the man whose life he had unknowingly saved. Whenever he had free time, he visited the hospital where Arthur was recovering. At first, Ethan expected little interaction. He assumed Arthur wouldn't remember him anyway. But to his surprise, Arthur welcomed him warmly each time. I owe you my life, Arthur said during one visit, his voice soft but sincere. Not many people would have stopped for a stranger like you did. Ethan shrugged modestly. Anyone would have done the same. Arthur chuckled weakly. No, they wouldn't. Trust me, I've seen enough of the world to know that. As the weeks turned into months, Ethan grew closer to Arthur. They talked about everything: Arthur's past as a successful entrepreneur, his strained relationship with Daniel, and his regrets about growing distant from loved ones. Ethan listened patiently, sharing bits of his own story whenever prompted. In return, Arthur shared wisdom gained from decades of experience, teaching Ethan lessons about perseverance, gratitude, and the importance of staying true to oneself. Through these conversations, Ethan realized something profound. Saving Arthur wasn't just about calling an ambulance or keeping him warm that snowy night. It was about showing compassion when others might have walked away. That single act of kindness had sparked a chain reaction, bringing Ethan opportunities he could never have dreamed of and forging connections that transcended social barriers. By the time Arthur was discharged from the hospital, Ethan felt like he had gained not just a mentor, but a friend. Little did he know, their bond was far from over, and neither was the impact of that fateful December evening. As the months rolled by, Ethan settled into his new role at Daniel's company. It wasn't easy, far from it. Every day brought challenges he hadn't anticipated, from navigating office politics to learning how to communicate with clients, who seemed miles ahead of him in terms of education and experience. But Ethan had always been a fighter, and this was no different. He tackled each obstacle head-on, determined not to let anyone down, not Daniel, not Lisa, and certainly not himself. At first, some of his coworkers were skeptical. They whispered behind his back, wondering why Daniel had hired someone with no formal qualifications. What can a delivery guy possibly bring to the table? One colleague muttered during a water cooler chat. Ethan overheard but chose not to react. Instead, he poured all his energy into proving them wrong. He arrived early, stayed late, and asked endless questions until he understood every task inside out. Slowly, the murmurs of doubt faded, replaced by grudging respect and eventually, genuine admiration. Lisa, the manager who had taken him under her wing, became more than just a mentor. She became a friend. She saw how hard Ethan worked and encouraged him whenever he doubted himself. "You've got something most people here lack," she told him one evening as they wrapped up a project together. "Heart, don't lose that." Ethan smiled faintly, though he still felt like an outsider sometimes. The world of suits and boardrooms was so far removed from the streets he used to ride on, delivering packages in the freezing cold. Yet, despite the differences, he found common ground with many of his colleagues. They weren't all snobs or judgmental. They were human beings too, with their own struggles and dreams. Over lunch breaks, Ethan shared stories about his childhood, his mom's illness, and his little sister's determination to finish school. In return, his coworkers opened up about their own lives, their fears of failure, their hopes for the future, and even their frustrations with work-life balance. But while Ethan focused on building a new life for himself, he never forgot where he came from. Every paycheck he received went toward helping his family. For the first time in years, his mother could afford proper medication, and his sister didn't have to skip meals to save money. Seeing their faces light up when he handed them cash filled him with pride. "We're finally getting somewhere," his mom said one evening, tears streaming down her cheeks. Ethan hugged her tightly, promising to keep pushing forward. Meanwhile, his visits to Arthur continued. The old man had moved back into his penthouse after recovering from the heart attack, but his health remained fragile. Despite this, Arthur insisted on seeing Ethan regularly. Their conversations grew deeper over time, touching on topics like regret, forgiveness, and legacy. One afternoon, as they sat by the large window overlooking the city skyline, Arthur turned to Ethan with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he began, his voice soft but steady, "I've spent my entire life chasing success. Money, power, recognition, it all seemed so important back then. But now, lying here looking at the sunset, none of it feels as meaningful as I thought it would." Ethan nodded, understanding exactly what Arthur meant. "I guess we all get caught up in stuff." "That doesn't really matter," he replied. "It's only when things hit close to home that we realize what's truly important." Arthur smiled faintly. "Exactly. And that's why I want to thank you again for reminding me of that. You saved my life, yes, but you also reminded me of the value of kindness, something I'd forgotten long ago." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. He didn't see himself as heroic or extraordinary. He was just doing what he believed was right. "I'm glad I could help," he said simply. A few weeks later, Arthur invited Ethan to dinner at his penthouse. It was a quiet affair, just the two of them sharing a meal prepared by a private chef. As they ate, Arthur broached a subject Ethan hadn't expected. "I've been thinking about my will," he said casually, as if discussing the weather, "and I've decided to make some changes." Ethan froze, his fork hovering mid-air. "Your will?" "Yes," Arthur confirmed, nodding. "You see, I've lived a long life, and I've accumulated more wealth than any one person needs. But I've also made mistakes, ignored relationships, prioritized greed over love. Now, I want to leave something behind that reflects who I am today, not who I used to be." Ethan listened intently, though he still wasn't sure where this conversation was heading. "Okay," he said slowly. Arthur looked directly at him, his eyes filled with sincerity. "I want to include you in my will, Ethan, not because you expect it, but because you deserve it. Your actions speak louder than words ever could." Ethan's jaw dropped. "Wait, no, that's not necessary. I don't need anything. I already feel grateful just knowing you and Daniel." "I know you don't need it," Arthur interrupted gently. "But this isn't about need. It's about gratitude. About recognizing goodness when I see it. Please, don't argue with me on this." For a moment, Ethan was speechless. The idea of inheriting part of Arthur's fortune felt surreal, almost overwhelming. He thought about declining, but deep down, he knew Arthur wouldn't take no for an answer. Besides, maybe this was fate, a chance to secure a better future for his family without constantly worrying about money. "All right," Ethan finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "If that's what you really want, then thank you. From the bottom of my heart." Arthur smiled, visibly relieved. "Good. Now, let's enjoy the rest of our meal. No more talk of wills or legacies tonight." As winter gave way to spring, Ethan's transformation became undeniable. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was thriving. His confidence grew with each passing week, and he began taking on bigger responsibilities at work. Daniel noticed the change and praised him openly during team meetings. "Ethan's proof that potential isn't defined by background," he once said. "He's shown us all what it means to adapt, learn, and grow." Outside of work, Ethan continued visiting Arthur, cherishing the bond they had formed. Their friendship transcended age and social status, built on mutual respect and shared values. Through Arthur, Ethan learned lessons about humility, resilience, and the importance of leaving a positive mark on the world. One evening, as they watched the sun dip below the horizon, Arthur placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You remind me of myself when I was younger," he said, full of hope, eager to make a difference. "Don't lose that fire, Ethan. Use it to create something meaningful." Ethan nodded, feeling a lump rise in his throat. He realized then that saving Arthur hadn't just changed his own life, it had reignited a spark within the old man too. Together they had found purpose in unexpected ways, bridging gaps that once seemed insurmountable. Little did Ethan know, this was only the beginning. The ripple effects of that snowy December night would continue to unfold, shaping not just his destiny, but the lives of countless others. Time has a funny way of changing people, and for Ethan, the years that followed his unexpected journey into Arthur's world transformed him in ways he could never have imagined. What started as a simple act of kindness on a cold December night had snowballed into something much bigger, a life-altering chain of events that not only reshaped his own path, but also touched the lives of those around him. At work, Ethan continued to rise through the ranks. His dedication didn't go unnoticed. While others might have rested on their laurels after earning a promotion or two, Ethan kept pushing himself harder. He took online courses during late nights, learning about business strategies, leadership, and finance. At first, it was overwhelming terms. Like ROI and quarterly projections sounded like another language, but with Lisa's guidance and his own relentless determination, he slowly began to understand. Each new skill he acquired felt like unlocking a door to a room he'd never been allowed into before. Daniel noticed this growth and entrusted Ethan with more responsibilities. One day he handed Ethan a file labeled Project Horizon. It was a bold initiative aimed at expanding the company's reach into underserved communities. The goal wasn't just profit, it was impact. "This is your chance to make a real difference," Daniel told him. "I trust you to lead it." Ethan stared at the folder in disbelief. Lead? Him? A former delivery boy who hadn't even finished high school? For a moment, self-doubt crept in. But then he remembered Arthur's words, "Don't lose that fire." Summoning every ounce of courage, Ethan accepted the challenge. The project turned out to be one of the toughest things Ethan had ever tackled. He spent weeks researching, meeting with community leaders, and brainstorming ideas. There were setbacks, plenty of them. Some partners pulled out last minute, while others criticized the plan as too ambitious. But Ethan refused to give up. He drew strength from his past, recalling the countless times he'd faced adversity and come out stronger. Slowly, Project Horizon began to take shape. By the time it launched, it had become a beacon of hope for struggling neighborhoods, providing jobs, training programs, and resources to those who needed them most. Through all of this, Ethan stayed close to Arthur. Their friendship deepened with each passing year, evolving into something akin to a father-son bond. Arthur loved hearing updates about Ethan's progress at work, often offering advice based on his decades of experience. In return, Ethan shared stories about his family, how his mom's health had improved, how his sister graduated top of her class, and how he was finally able to buy them a small house instead of renting a cramped apartment. One summer evening, as they sat together on Arthur's balcony sipping tea, Ethan brought up a topic that had been weighing on his mind. "Arthur," he began hesitantly, "why did you choose me? Out of everyone in the world, why did you decide to include me in your will?" Arthur chuckled softly, setting his teacup down. "Because you reminded me of what truly matters," he replied. "When I collapsed that night, I wasn't expecting anyone to stop. People walk past strangers in need all the time. It's easier to look away. But you didn't hesitate. You acted with pure compassion, without expecting anything in return. That's rare, Ethan, and it deserves to be rewarded." Ethan looked down at his hands, feeling a mix of gratitude and humility. "I still can't believe any of this happened," he admitted. "Sometimes I wake up and think it's all a dream." "It's not a dream," Arthur said firmly. "It's proof that goodness exists, even in a world that often feels cold and indifferent. You've shown me that, Ethan, and I hope you'll continue showing others." As the months passed, Ethan found himself reflecting on Arthur's words more and more. He realized that the wealth he stood to inherit wasn't just money, it was an opportunity to pay forward the kindness that had changed his life. Inspired by Project Horizon's success, Ethan decided to take things further. He approached Daniel with an idea to create a foundation dedicated to helping underprivileged youth gain access to education and employment opportunities. Daniel loved the concept immediately. "Let's call it the Horizon Foundation," he suggested. "A continuation of everything you've already started." With Daniel's support, Ethan poured his heart into building the foundation. They partnered with local schools, nonprofits, and businesses to provide scholarships, mentorship programs, and job training workshops. Ethan made sure to visit these programs regularly, speaking directly to the kids and young adults who benefited from them. He told them his story, the struggles, the sacrifices, and the moments of grace that had led him here. "If someone like me can do it," he would say, "then so can you." Word of the Horizon Foundation spread quickly, drawing attention from media outlets and philanthropists alike. Ethan was invited to speak at conferences, share his journey on podcasts, and even appear on TV shows. At first, he felt awkward being in the spotlight. He wasn't used to people calling him a role model or a success story. But over time, he embraced it, using his platform to inspire others. Everywhere he went, he carried the same message. No matter where you start in life, kindness and hard work can open doors you never knew existed. Despite his growing fame, Ethan remained grounded. He still visited Arthur whenever he could, cherishing the wisdom the old man continued to impart. One crisp autumn afternoon, as they strolled through Central Park, Arthur stopped suddenly and turned to Ethan. "You know," he said, his voice tinged with emotion, "you've given me something I thought I'd lost forever, hope. Watching you grow, seeing the impact you're making, it reminds me that my life hasn't been wasted." Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat. "Don't talk like that," he said gently. "Your life isn't over yet. We've still got plenty of sunsets to watch together." Arthur smiled, though. There was a bitter sweetness in his eyes. "Maybe, but when the time comes, I want you to promise me something." "Anything," Ethan replied without hesitation. "Promise me you'll keep doing what you're doing. Keep helping people. Keep spreading kindness. That's the legacy I want to leave behind, not through my name, but through you." Ethan nodded, his chest tightening with emotion. "I promise, Arthur. I won't let you down." True to his word, Ethan kept that promise long after Arthur passed away peacefully in his sleep one winter morning. Though grief-stricken, Ethan channeled his sorrow into action, pouring even more energy into the foundation. Under his leadership, the Horizon Foundation grew exponentially, reaching thousands of lives across multiple cities. Scholarships funded bright futures. Mentorship programs connected young minds with experienced professionals, and job training workshops equipped individuals with skills to build better lives for themselves and their families. Ethan's own family thrived alongside him. His mom enjoyed her golden years in comfort, free from the constant worry of medical bills. His sister graduated college and landed a stable job, fulfilling her dreams of becoming a teacher. Together, they celebrated milestones they once thought impossible, forever grateful for the chain of events set in motion by that snowy December night. Looking back on his journey, Ethan often marveled at how far he'd come. From a humble delivery boy braving icy streets to a respected figure inspiring change, his story served as living proof that kindness, even in its smallest forms, could create ripples capable of transforming lives. And though he had achieved more than he ever dreamed possible, Ethan knew the greatest reward wasn't wealth or recognition. It was the knowledge that he had made a difference, just as someone once made a difference for him. For Ethan, life wasn't about titles, trophies, or bank accounts. It was about connection, about lifting others up just as he had been lifted. And as he stood on stage delivering speeches, visiting classrooms filled with eager students, or simply sharing a meal with his family, he carried that truth with him always. The greatest gift we can give is ourselves. Years rolled by, and Ethan's story became one of those rare tales that people couldn't help but share. It wasn't just about his rise from a struggling delivery boy to a successful leader. It was about the ripple effect of kindness he had set in motion. The Horizon Foundation, once a small idea born out of gratitude and purpose, grew into a nationwide movement. Schools, community centers, and workplaces began adopting its programs, spreading the message that no act of compassion was too small to make an impact. Ethan himself remained at the heart of it all. Despite his growing influence, he stayed true to his roots. He still rode his old bicycle on weekends, not because he needed to, but because it reminded him of where he came from. Sometimes, when he cycled through familiar streets, people would recognize him and wave. Kids shouted his name, their faces lighting up as they called out, "Hey, aren't you the guy who started Horizon?" Ethan always stopped for them, taking a moment to chat or listen to their dreams. To these kids, he wasn't some distant figure. They saw him as proof that anyone could overcome obstacles if they refused to give up. One crisp spring morning, Ethan stood outside a newly opened community center named after Arthur Hartman. A plaque near the entrance read, **, dedicated to the man whose second chance inspired countless others. Inside, the building buzzed with energy students typing away on donated laptops, young adults practicing job interviews, and volunteers teaching classes on everything from coding to carpentry. As Ethan walked through the halls, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was what Arthur had envisioned, a legacy built not on wealth, but on hope. The dedication ceremony was packed with people eager to celebrate the occasion. Former beneficiaries of the foundation shared heartfelt speeches, recounting how Ethan's work had changed their lives. One young woman, barely in her 20s, spoke about how she'd been on the verge of dropping out of school when she discovered the Horizon Scholarship program. Today, she was graduating college with honors and planning to become a social worker. Another speaker, a middle-aged man, talked about how the foundation had helped him retrain after losing his factory job. Now, he ran his own small business, employing others in his community. As Ethan listened to these stories, tears welled up in his eyes. He thought back to the night he saved Arthur's life, unaware of the domino effect it would trigger. Back then, he hadn't considered himself heroic. He'd simply done what he believed was right. But now, seeing the tangible results of his efforts, he understood the power of even the smallest acts of kindness. That single decision to stop and help an elderly stranger had sparked a chain reaction, touching lives far beyond anything he could have imagined. After the ceremony, Daniel approached Ethan, clapping him on the shoulder. "You've done incredible things," he said, pride evident in his voice. "My dad would be so proud." "I couldn't have done it without your support," Ethan replied sincerely. "Or without Lisa's guidance or everyone else who believed in me along the way," Daniel smiled. "True, but let's not forget you're the one who made the impossible possible. You didn't just take what was given to you. You turned it into something bigger." Ethan nodded, reflecting on how much he'd grown since that snowy December evening. Saving Arthur had been the catalyst, but it was the choices he made afterward that truly defined his journey. Every challenge he faced, every late night spent studying, every conversation with someone in need, it all added up to create the person he was today. And while he sometimes wondered if he deserved the opportunities he'd been handed, he reminded himself of Arthur's words, "Goodness deserves to be rewarded." Later that day, Ethan visited Arthur's grave, tucked away in a quiet corner of a serene cemetery. He brought flowers, bright yellow sunflowers, which reminded him of Arthur's warmth and optimism. Sitting cross-legged beside the headstone, Ethan spoke softly, as though Arthur were still there listening. "You know, I think about you every day," he said, brushing a stray leaf off the stone. "I wish you could see everything that's happened since you left. The foundation is thriving, and so many people are getting second chances thanks to you and to me, I guess. But honestly, none of it would have happened without you. You gave me a shot when I least expected it, and I'll never forget that." He paused, letting the cool breeze rustle the leaves around him. "I promised you I'd keep spreading kindness, and I mean it. Every time I meet someone struggling, I think about how you trusted me enough to change my life. So, wherever you are, thank you for believing in me, for teaching me, and for reminding me that we're all connected in ways we don't always understand." For a long moment, Ethan sat in silence. staring at the inscription on the headstone, asterisk, "A life well lived leaves behind a legacy of love." Then, standing up and brushing dirt off his jeans, he whispered, "Rest easy, Arthur. Your legacy is safe with me." Back home, Ethan gathered his family around the dinner table. His mom, now frail but content, smiled as she watched him laugh with his sister. She often joked that she barely recognized her son anymore, not because of his success, but because of the confidence and joy radiating from him. Gone was the weary teenager who used to come home exhausted from deliveries. In his place was a man who carried both scars and triumphs, using them to inspire others. "You should write a book," his sister teased, pointing her fork at him. "Seriously, Ethan, your story would sell millions." Ethan laughed, shaking his head. "Nah? Books are for fancy writers. Besides, my story isn't over yet. There's still so much more to do." She raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "Well," Ethan said, leaning back in his chair, "I've been thinking about expanding the foundation internationally. Imagine helping kids in other countries get access to education and jobs. Or maybe starting a mentorship program specifically for delivery workers and gig economy folks, people like me back in the day. They deserve a fair shot too." His mom reached across the table, placing a hand over his. "You'll figure it out, sweetheart. You always do." Her faith in him meant the world, and Ethan knew she was right. No matter what challenges lay ahead, he'd tackle them the same way he always had, with determination, humility, and a willingness to help others along the way. That night, as Ethan lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he thought about the road ahead. The Horizon Foundation was thriving, yes, but there was always room to grow. More communities to reach, more lives to touch, more bridges to build. He realized then that his mission wasn't just about giving back, it was about creating a world where kindness became the norm rather than the exception. Before drifting off to sleep, Ethan whispered a silent promise to himself. Asterisk, no matter what happens, I'll keep moving forward. For Arthur, for Daniel, for my family, and for everyone who needs someone to believe in them. Asterisk, and with that vow echoing in his mind, Ethan closed his eyes, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. Because life, he had learned, wasn't about waiting for storms to pass, it was about learning to dance in the rain.